Łukasz, tell us what's happening on the charts.
There are some people who would say that a lot is happening right now, while others would say that everything seems to be completely quiet and still. We already had 64,000 units just a few short days ago, and even more than that before, but now the current count is 62,570. As usual, opinions are divided. I think we'll come back to this topic
A bit later.
a bit more in detail, but generally 62,570 is over 1% less than a week ago, while Ethereum is at 1,783, which is just slightly symbolically above what it was a week ago, up by 0.2%. So Ethereum is doing a little better. And if we look at our list of top coins here, Ethereum is still second in terms of market cap at 215 billion. Right behind it is Tether with 184 billion. So it's really catching up. Fourth place is BNB, and here it's already 76 billion, which is more than half less. You could say that the top three have broken away from the peloton and are pulling ahead. That flip between Ethereum and USDT has moved a bit further away from us. A week ago, it was close. There was even a brief moment when they switched places, but it lasted only for fractions of a moment. And of course, next are XRP, Solana, and Tron. I definitely think that we'll come back to Solana a bit later today. But out of all these major top-tier cryptocurrencies, the biggest surprise was probably HYPE, which refers to Hyperliquid, which unfortunately dropped by over 10% in value over the course of the last week. Solana as well, despite some interesting news, is down almost 8%. XRP is down 5.5%. It's mostly red here, and it's hard to find any winners. In fact, the only one might be Ethereum, which is up 0.2. But it's not surprising because political topics, the Clarity Act and so on, which we'll talk about in a moment, are pushing Ethereum up a bit. Of course, you could set resistance points and say that a drop below $60,000 is something we really wouldn't want if we're hoping for growth. We'd like to see a breakout above 64 and for that level to hold. For now, though, that doesn't seem likely. And in the short term, of course, 63,000 is what we'd like to break through and 62,000 to hold so we don't get confirmation of a decline. As always, some say it will go up, others say it will go down. And a third group says it will move sideways. So someone is definitely right. Let me know in the comments what your predictions are, because I'm curious. I know there's an interesting group gathering here, and some of you are really extremely good when it comes to forecasting the price of Bitcoin.
Speaking of this race between Ethereum and Bitcoin, I don't know if the word race is really appropriate here, because after all, they're competing in completely different classes, no matter how you look at it. Nevertheless, Ethereum has strengthened against Bitcoin by actually almost 12% compared to Tuesday 2 weeks ago. Almost 12%. That's interesting, as you mentioned. We'll probably discuss this topic in more detail later today. And actually, I'm thinking about it now because there's one more thing worth mentioning. It is somewhat tedious, only just a tiny bit, when you examine these things and don't notice certain nuances.
Vacation, vacation, vacation.
On the one hand, it's vacation time, and I completely agree with that. But on the other hand, we're getting more and more used to what's happening in geopolitics. And we've basically gotten used to the fact that the only thing that's certain is that things will be very changeable and very dynamic. Because, I don't know if you've heard about Donald Trump's new idea, a 20% fee for protecting all ships and tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz. I think this came up yesterday on one of the tweets, or actually on that social media platform. What's it called? Truff.
And right here we have Sarshell.
Of course, it's 20% from those who are allowed to pass, because Donald Trump decides who can pass and who cannot. He explains that since we are currently responsible for guarding the overall maritime security throughout this entire strait, the standard fee will be exactly 20% of the total estimated value of your cargo.
It is actually considerably more costly and expensive than the specific price point that the Iranians and the people of Yemen are looking for, as they would prefer to pay a little less, somewhere in the neighborhood of approximately $1 million per tanker.
It's hard not to see the similarity to the pit tax on cryptocurrencies in Poland. We can see that there are very strong correlations and similarities here. But it was precisely that tweet from yesterday that caused oil prices to jump up again, as if they could have gone down. That's the whole situation right there. And this somehow affects the crypto situation, although it seems less and less so. But there is one event that, if we look at the last 5 or 6 months, has occurred once every month and has had a very strong impact on crypto prices, on the fluctuations in crypto prices. Let me pull up my notes here. In February, this event caused the price of Bitcoin to drop by almost 6%. In March, it jumped by over 8%. In April, it fell by 4%. In May, it dropped by nearly 30%. And in June, it jumped by 11%. What do you think it is? No.
I have no idea.
All right. I was about to say something stupid. This is the announcement of the CPI index, meaning the inflation indicator. CPI is the most important measure of inflation.
So
the real one, without those tricks where they include things like locomotives, etc. And we know that what actually appears in these reports or in the announcement of this index has a very strong impact on the potential decision to lower or raise interest rates. In fact, you could even say, looking at the numbers I just mentioned, that whether there will be a rate cut, a rate hold, or a rate hike, the market discounts it in advance. And where does it all start? It seems that everything points to the moment when these results are announced. And today the CPI is supposed to be announced, so it's worth placing a bet. In Europe, you can't bet with any leverage. You can't, or maybe only on a few platforms, but if someone uses such solutions, they can place a bet. I wanted to say that one thing is certain. Actually, I don't know if that's certain, but we can assume that it's unlikely the market will just move sideways.
Something has to happen. If it does move sideways, that will actually indicate that we might be seeing a real change in the major trend. At least that's what analysts say, that if an event which has previously caused volatility and led to either increases or decreases now fails to trigger such declines, it indicates that we are experiencing a global or significant trend change, that we've reached a certain tipping point. I'm really quite curious to hear exactly how you see it from your perspective. But in fact, among many of the top analysts right now, there's actually, let me go back for a moment to what you just said about those specific results. And I don't know if you've heard the news yet, but we have a very interesting and quite significant announcement coming directly from Mr. Trump himself. Here we go. Trump is once again starting to talk about something like a shutdown. A government shutdown is now in effect, meaning there won't be any official reports or data updates at this time, that there won't be any information about inflation, there won't be a jobs report, no data at all. And if there's no data, then what happens? The Fed can't operate. As a result, it can't change anything, can't raise, can't lower, because there's nothing. There is no data. That's in September. We will definitely come back to this topic. September is going to be hot, that's for sure. However, this information shows that things are still tense in the United States. There's still a lot of turmoil. On one hand, we have the political or geopolitical situation related to the Strait of Hormuz, with what's happening there. There were massive attacks over the weekend, some of the largest ever in the entire history of this conflict, or maybe even several conflicts, depending on who you ask. Some say this is already the second or third, others say no.
Someone might say that they are completely independent and have nothing to do with each other. Probably Donald Trump.
I think they would definitely sign off on that proposal.
Would agree.
Yes, it is certainly true that there is quite a bit of confusion surrounding that situation. We are seeing a series of massive and devastating attacks driven by an increasingly radicalized government in Iran, which is acting in a way that is becoming more and more aggressive and hostile toward the region. Once again, the assassination has been announced of the head of Iranian defense. And here I'm saying this a bit sarcastically, because this isn't the first time they've said he was killed, only for it to turn out that he actually wasn't. So they said, but this time it's for real. Well, no, actually not.
But now,
it's really for sure.
In this specific case, that old saying, that particular sentence really fits perfectly 100%.
Exactly. In a major military development, a massive and powerful bomb was recently dropped directly onto that sprawling warehouse complex. Reports indicate that the specific individual in question was indeed present at the site during the strike, and official sources are now confirming that the entire operation was carried out with complete success, achieving all of its primary objectives. Let's wait for confirmation. Right now, there's such a huge information overload around this conflict that it really shows how the information comes in waves. In the past, when there were conflicts, we had reporters who informed us about what was happening with a delay of weeks. Then we had radio, which sped things up a bit, but that also brought about a fight against it, namely false information. Fake news is not an invention of the internet. I want to emphasize that here. And now we have online news practically in real time. And at this point, they're being drowned out by a whole mass of information that is simply fake. There's really nothing more to say about that. There was actually an interesting effect when at one point Twitter blocked bots in the context of politics. Suddenly things got very quiet in politics. For a couple of weeks, it stopped being so heated. Well, maybe not weeks, but for over a week, it was definitely much calmer.
Have you heard about the dead internet theory? My youngest son told me about it recently, and I actually had to look it up. This theory appeared a long time ago, and back then it was mostly treated as a conspiracy theory, but apparently now it isn't anymore. The point is that more and more of the traffic, and even when this theory was first announced, it was found that actually the vast majority of internet traffic is generated by bots. That all those view counts under YouTube videos, along with a massive number of likes and so on, are now, to a much greater and more significant extent, being generated by automated bots. And that this so-called real traffic, the question is, what does real traffic mean? Let's say human traffic, that its percentage share is getting smaller and smaller. Speaking of bots being turned off, well,
yes, absolutely. Right now, especially in this modern age of, let's not kid ourselves here, advanced artificial intelligence, which can easily help us create countless fake accounts and can help us build up this specific kind of artificial traffic. Exactly. It is honestly getting harder and harder for the average person to distinguish a genuine real post from a completely fake one these days. It is a real challenge for everyone involved. What used to be a nightmare, copying prepared content, which was especially common in politics, has recently become a hot topic again because quite a lot of people have fallen victim to it. They took this text from somewhere and suddenly the same thing appeared on dozens of Facebook or X accounts. Posts that are identical down to the last period made me wonder why such a mistake was made, because it was revealed that a lot of posts are either artificial, or even if they are generated by real people, they're not actually generated, but simply copy-pasted onto real accounts. This is currently some kind of strategy where you have real people with real accounts and you simply have them in your network. Each one has to publish specific posts. So let's be careful with the news. Let's be careful with everything that comes up because there really is more and more of it. The famous case we talked about a few weeks ago, Polymarket, which got caught. For those of you who might not have seen my previous content, let me take a moment to remind you, there was a specific period in the history of the internet when a massive wave of videos began to surface everywhere. These clips were recorded by very young individuals who, in an incredibly intense and emotional manner, were showing the world exactly how they were placing their high-stakes bets on the Polymarket platform. And these were quite unusual bets, like, for example, whether during the official public speech of some specific senator who is holding a press conference today, the specific word McDonald's would be mentioned at all, or whether he would continue to speak for a total duration of longer than 4 minutes and 50 seconds. These kinds of bets were shown, and they would demonstrate how they turned $10 into 100,000. It all turned out to be fake. Fake, not in the sense that the videos themselves were fake. The videos were real. They actually showed the screen with the winnings, but it turned out that everything was recorded after the fact, and probably on a specially fabricated website by Polymarket, which pretended to be real, and those were neither real bets nor real winnings. Well, yes, you really have to be careful in these situations. I always tell people, if someone reaches out to show you that there is a massive financial opportunity just waiting for you, claiming you can earn 20, 50, 100, or even 1000% returns on your money, and they actually call you personally about it, you should immediately hang up the phone and block that number right away, because that kind of offer is never true. You see, truly good investment opportunities never call us out of the blue. That is just completely impossible in reality.
Questions are coming up, and I think we can address them. Namely, when will the Kanga European platform launch?
This is something that ordinary people who have no contact with bureaucracy might not understand. How is it possible? We've received the license, we have the license, and it's the best, the highest one, the so-called level 3, and yet the platform still isn't launched. The reasons, as usual, are quite mundane. For someone who doesn't operate in the formal legal world and the reality of bureaucracy, it's incomprehensible. one might get the impression that it's a bit like what Ms. Odgusu said, that she issues KRS numbers, and that's why, thanks to her, entrepreneurs can operate. The situation here looks somewhat similar. For example, I'll say that it was only last week that the company received the proper documents with the European NIP, so we have to wait here. Officials have their own circles, their own gears, and the platform, the registrations will start soon. That's why it's worth visiting the Kanga Exchange website and signing up to get a notification as soon as registration opens. We hope that will be literally in the next few days, so it's worth staying alert. A wide variety of additional features and functionalities will be officially unveiled, demonstrated, and showcased to the public on a consistent and ongoing basis. I don't want to say it will be every day because it probably won't be every single day, but let's say that at least once every single week, if not more often, there will be something brand new and exciting happening for everyone to see. Exactly 2 weeks ago from today, I said that it would be an exceptionally good opportunity for us to get this Mika during the summer holiday season, because the holidays are a period of peace and quiet and a very good moment to start our journey. Unfortunately, that's how the world is structured. We have to follow this regulated path. We can't do anything now, even if we just want to make a minor adjustment to the rules. It has to go through the officials and be approved by them. These are the charms of being a regulated platform.
I think someone might ask us now, well, what about exchanges like Kraken, OKEx, Bybit, and so on? Somehow they've managed to deal with all of this.
To put this into a clearer perspective for you, let me put it this way. The cryptocurrency exchange OKEx officially secured its regulatory license just 1 day after the MiCA framework was finally approved.
Yes, that was very strange. It is almost as if we're saying they secretly pulled some strings behind the scenes or something to get their way.
No. I'm just saying that some got it the day after. How is that possible? I don't know. I can't understand it. It took us almost 2 years to go through all those procedures, to meet all those requirements, to adjust all the paperwork, straighten things out, describe everything, come to an agreement, explain. It wasn't trivial. Once again, huge thanks to the whole team because we made it through. And it wasn't trivial, especially since we are, I don't know how many entities in Europe received it, among others. For example, permission for cash transactions, that's quite an exception, isn't it?
Right. And also, as we mentioned earlier, we have to remember that this channel we're on is the official channel of this Kanga that received the license. Let me remind you, the license was granted to the company CE Alpha Roots, just so no one can accuse us otherwise, a Latvian company for operating the cryptocurrency platform at the address Kanga Exchange EU. But back when we were preparing to obtain this license, we saw, first of all, that we are Polish, and we know very well that in Poland, various political and administrative entities aren't necessarily fond of us. What's more, we took steps to apply for a license in several countries, and on top of that, each country takes a slightly different approach to MiCA, which also didn't make our task any easier. Because if, for example, we had received it in country X, I'm not even going to name it, we would have had to launch a platform that would operate a bit differently. And now for someone listening to us, this might seem strange, but yes, that's really how it is. And attention, I think this is a very good moment because, as I said, sometimes the connection cuts out here, and probably not everything should be said since, after all, it's only 9:30 in the morning. I invite you next Friday. We invite you next Friday to the meetup in Krakow on July 30th. There we can speak openly with courage, with our heads held high. And in general, we invite you to the Royal Capital.
Thursday,
thank you. Wojtek, thank you very much for listening to what we're talking about here. At least you do. On July 30th, 2026 at LUM. Entry is, of course, free, but for various reasons, we need you to register so we know how many people will come. So please register now. A registration link will appear here shortly. Wojtek, what are you saying? The link is already up. Thank you very much, Wojtek, for taking care of that as well. Such a kind-hearted guy. We invite you, and there we'll be able to talk about various topics.
Yes, absolutely. At these wonderful community meetups, there is always such a positive mood and a really great energy to sit down and talk about things that are often quite a bit harder to express in a strictly official way. Because after all, when speaking officially, we really have to watch our words here so as not to say something that could be misunderstood. Let me remind you, for example, of the case where we said we were a Polish exchange. Someone from the officials decided they didn't like that because we weren't a Polish exchange. Not a single one of our active users ever came forward to accuse us of intentionally misleading them. But the regulatory officials somehow decided that this was exactly the case. No? So you really have to be extremely careful. But for just a brief moment, let us circle back to
The entire world
of crypto. Here's a very interesting statement from the head of Coinbase. The head of Coinbase talks about savings. He talks about how much we should have in crypto and says, listen, anyone who doesn't have at least 5% of their assets in Bitcoin will be very sad. They will really regret it. According to what the head of Coinbase says, $1 million per Bitcoin by 2030. And those who do not take advantage of the current opportunity with the price being so low will be very dissatisfied. There are more and more such voices, and they are being expressed more boldly because, in fact, even if we look at what official advisors, not tax advisors, but investment advisors are saying, they are increasingly openly stating that not owning crypto is actually a certain problem. And here, of course, a little note again for those who are new, and we know that quite a lot of new people are watching us. Let's remember, Bitcoin is limited to 21 million. There won't be any more, and everyone even says there are definitely fewer, because a lot of Bitcoins have been lost irretrievably and they cannot be recovered. Here, the estimates vary, but we're talking about anywhere from 1.4 to even 1.3. There are some people who claim that 1.3% of all Bitcoins are lost forever, which in my own personal opinion is a bit of an overstatement, but saying that 1/4 of them are gone sounds quite reasonable to me. And it is certainly true that well over 2 million of them are lost. Even if we assume there are 20 million Bitcoins, and there are definitely more millionaires than that, not every millionaire will be able to own even 1/10 of a Bitcoin. So listen, I encourage you to rethink your investment strategies. And here's a little side note. You know that on Saturdays we have no comment.
and
This is a bit more of a laid back show. And here I wanted to propose a topic that I'd like to discuss with Sławek. The topic is about how limiting supply can affect the price of an asset and how this relates to other things, especially in comparison to, well, I won't say what exactly we can refer to, because in recent years there was a very interesting story with an asset that
had a remarkably and unusually restricted scope.
supply. And what happens when that supply actually isn't limited? With Bitcoin, it's limited technically or technologically. It can't be changed. No asteroid discovery is going to change that. But let us know if you'd like to hear more about this. A longer conversation on this topic. We're waiting for your comments on whether this is a good topic for the next one. No comment.
Exactly. Now we can get back to the discussion about your buddy, Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor is accumulating. First of all, as I understand it, this was already discussed during the last quarter hour. He sold off a lot of Bitcoins, but now he's accumulating capital. At the moment, when it comes to cash reserves, he has set aside $3 billion. And note, the last big cash injection, a really big cash injection, didn't come from selling Bitcoins,
but from selling shares.
What comes to mind when you sell something in order to pay someone? You can't release it.
I have to say that I don't share this opinion. I think that Michael Saylor did touch on a certain topic, but he doesn't expose the weakness of this approach, which he represents as everyone thinks about this crypto, that he buys crypto and then sells shares in order to pay interest to those who invested earlier. I think that he does, to some extent, show or expose the weaknesses of the fiduciary system, meaning the one based on fiat currencies, because let's remember that all settlements, whether we like it or not, Michael Saylor still does in fiat. But that's a topic we might want to come back to later. Let's give him a bit of a break for now, because it's quite... I refer those who are interested in what happened with the strategy to the latest No Comment episode. We discussed it there with Marcin. Marcin had prepared a very interesting analysis. I encourage you to watch the previous episode. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Saylor, although I do feel that he still maybe didn't invent it. But he did initiate a certain process that really isn't that stupid. And I wouldn't call it a pyramid scheme, as some people try to label it. This mechanism adds up mathematically and, of course, works as long as Bitcoin keeps rising. I'll let you in on a secret: $4,000. $4,000 per Bitcoin is the threshold value for Michael Saylor. I think the probability of reaching such a price is extremely low.
My fundamental doubt comes from the very specific fact that when an entire business model is based strictly on mathematics, we inevitably run into the complex problem that John Maynard Keynes generated. He was that famous economist, or actually, if we look closer, maybe he was not even primarily an economist, but rather a brilliant mathematician from the beginning of the last century, whose influential views were eventually adopted by many socialists across the globe. He based everything very heavily on mathematics. On the chart, everything adds up. A lot of things add up on the chart, but this approach that we act rationally and make the best possible decisions from a mathematical point of view just doesn't work. Once again, I just want to express this view. If there's no real work behind the business and the whole business is just that I use the money I get from you to simply buy one asset mindlessly, I just buy it, I keep buying it, I take the money, and this business won't survive when suddenly someone stops giving me that money, then it has no foundation.
I can always sell this asset, as Saylor just demonstrated by selling Bitcoins and showing, hey, I can sell Bitcoins to pay the interest. I have so many Bitcoins that I can pay off this interest for a very, very long period of time. So I would say that, but I agree. I also think that businesses, especially financial ones, which have really undergone significant expansion and become more complex here over the last century, show that the artificial creation of money doesn't last long. Well,
yes, and speaking of that, since I brought it up, I wanted to find an example where mathematics works, but economics does not. And here, an example is raising the minimum wage. It's said that if we raise the minimum wage, people will earn more, and so they'll spend more, and the economy will move forward, but it turns out that's not necessarily the case.
Well, because there are many other sociological factors involved.
But exactly, now we can move on to a topic that really interested me. It's about Bolivia. Bolivia, which until recently had a very negative attitude toward crypto, is opening up to cryptocurrencies and is considering the option of making USDT, a legal means of payment.
This stands in complete and total contrast to the actions currently being taken by the European Union.
Yes, very much so. But I did a bit of quick research that for many years, Bolivia had its local currency pegged to the US dollar. Why were they able to peg it? Because they had large deposits of natural resources. In general, they had quite decent exports, so they accumulated dollars and were able to protect their currency, which was very important to them. But it turned out that in recent years, all those savings, they had started to shrink significantly. And Bolivia had to give up this currency peg quite recently. What's more, it turned out that there simply aren't any dollars in the country. That is, companies that want to import. Well, they have nowhere to get dollars from because there simply aren't any in the banking system. They ran out. So this is the same
problem that Poland had in the 1970s and 1980s.
Exactly. And that's precisely why they're considering the legal full-scale introduction of USDT. There's another issue there because since I think last year, Bolivia has been on the FATF list, meaning those
bad countries.
We're talking about countries that have a red flag raised in the context of money laundering. So these Bolivian leaders are taking this seriously and say, well, if we introduce USDT, we have to do it in a way that it won't be used for illegal activities or money laundering, etc., because that would only make our situation worse. But we need to have USDT because it's much more accessible than dollars in the banking system. Very interesting. From that moment on, this year, crypto trading volume across Bolivia is now 6 times higher than the previous year's figures.
Well, look at that. So there is a country that is introducing digital money.
And
now I want to bring up two topics. One is, of course, a country we used to talk about very loudly, but lately it's been a bit quieter. And here you go. El Salvador currently holds over 7,700 Bitcoins, worth $500 million. They've been buying 1 Bitcoin a day since 2022, and they've never sold a single one yet. They are steadily building up their cushion, and they remain active in their pursuits. It just hasn't been discussed much lately, but if you look closely, they are still at it.
And
they keep moving forward. It's the same with our main lumberjack, by the way. things have gotten interesting here. Of course, I mean, Milei and what he's doing in Argentina. Listen, when he took office, it was 2 years ago, inflation was over 200%. 200%. Listen, hardly anyone stops to think about what that actually means. 200%, but 200% inflation, and some say it was even much higher. That means that as soon as you got your money, you had to spend it immediately, because with every passing minute, it was noticeably losing value. Right now, that inflation has dropped. Some even say to just over 20%. A great one could say success. There was a bit of confusion there because at a certain point, someone has to pay the bill. Someone has to pay the bill and they are paying it. These are the people who didn't actually make a massive fortune from that specific system. But they certainly got used to the state covering all of their daily costs. Individuals who worked for various government offices and those who worked directly for the state. And suddenly it turned out that everything they were doing wasn't really that necessary. And now they're having financial problems. But what's important is the number of people living in poverty dropped fivefold over those 2 years. The number dropped fivefold, not by 5%, not by 50%, but fivefold. The number of people living in poverty has changed. So, very interesting
numbers. 2 remarks. I'll start with the positive one. I remember that when Milei took power, there wasn't just the problem that they had. I don't know if it was runaway inflation or hyperinflation. Well, they simply had very high inflation, but at the same time, they also had very high interest rates. So basically, taking out a loan was just, although actually, if you took out a loan, you ended up with a lot of it with interest, but maybe it wasn't worth it for you to sell it. I think there were also some situations like that, 200 to 300%. I don't remember exactly, but if someone checks, those were the interest rates. Actually in Argentina, but now that I think about it, I guess it worked like this. People still took out loans because the currency was falling faster than the interest rates. So it was a kind of self-perpetuating mechanism, you could say. And in fact, Bielan points out that he achieved some kind of success, but there was another problem. Actually, there were a billion problems. But Argentina had regulations that strengthened local entrepreneurs. An example of this is something I heard about. There was a law that set a parameter stating that 50% of flights over or under Argentina, well, I just wanted to say under the Argentine sky, had to be operated by local airlines. And of course, everyone knew what that meant. If you have a quota, it's obvious that those local airlines could simply set prices that didn't have to compete, didn't have to fight with competition. And he removed that apparently very, very quickly. The result was that suddenly people started to have money to fly. Not because they got richer, but because competition caused the prices to drop. And it was the same with the beef subsidies for those farmers. Suddenly it turns out, and this is exactly the case you're talking about, that a farmer who was just getting by, either because he was getting subsidies or because there was a guaranteed parity that his beef had to be bought. First of all, he didn't really have to compete. He didn't have to actually try very hard.
The quality was dropping. It was all about quantity, not quality. And then so that it wasn't really working well. But let's get back, listen, to crypto. Because I feel like today's episode isn't very much about crypto. So listen, I want to show you a few things. Or maybe first, let's talk a bit about the Clarity Act. The Clarity Act, this Friday, the Clarity Act is being fast-tracked to one of the last remaining subcommittees in the Senate. And I have to say, the pressure is mounting to get it approved. The deadline, the really, really, truly final deadline is, I'm speaking from memory now, August 9th, because that's probably the last day the Senate is in session and can pass it. Then there's the summer recess, and after that, the midterms, meaning the elections. And it's already being said that nothing can be done about it because there will be more important issues. But for whom is this Clarity Act the most important? It's not just for Bitcoin, but for Ethereum. That's what many commentators are saying. They point out that Ethereum could be the main beneficiary of the Clarity Act being passed because it will mean that many activities, many actions for which Ethereum was actually created will start to be regulated, and it will be possible to function properly. And here, a small digression. In Japan, one of the larger funds, no, chose Ethereum as its main network for tokenization and DeFi operations, and Solana, just as a side note, it's not just Ethereum, but I think now we have a task called the episode's password.
Yes, I suggest grubby, thick, fat. And I'll explain why in a moment. Because Gruby is broadcasting, and here he's writing us a comment saying that we're silent and not saying anything about the European Kanga. It seems to me that we talked about it for at least 4 or 5 minutes today. So Gruby is broadcasting. Let us know if you just tuned in a moment ago or if our earlier answer didn't satisfy you. But since Gruby is broadcasting, he was the person who made it so that
XRP appeared on the exchange. Yes,
exactly. I think we can honor him with the slogan Gruby. So Gruby, this one's for you. Let us know if you heard our earlier statement, and if not, just rewind, and that's it. If unfortunately it doesn't satisfy you, let us know as well.
Will Bitcoin go up or down?
That depends on the CPI.
I'll tell you right here, and here you go. Let's take a look at Vivek Sen, who is actually a quite well-known and respected market analyst. He is showing us right here on this chart exactly how much we should expect the price to increase in the coming months. He explains his theory that Bitcoin has historically always hit its absolute market bottom approximately 23 months after it has finished reaching its previous cycle peak. And now we are exactly in that 23rd month, which means the end of the bottoms. From now on, that's it. Only growth from here, of course. So it's not all sunshine. We have another analyst.
But you know what? I wouldn't agree with that conclusion you showed. Not the conclusion, but the input data, because we calculated this once before. And that bottom should have occurred after the ATH in October, exactly a year after that. So
everyone counts it the way
they want,
and however it suits them, which shows the opposite thesis. I want to show you that those who say they know how Bitcoin will behave, here I have, hello?
Łukasz, a picture of goats? You never said you have goats? Wait a second.
Done. Do I need to click? Yes.
It works.
A chart that's supposed to show that we could drop even to $52,500. I'm emphasizing what I've been saying all along. The probability that it will drop to 52 is not zero. It's there. That's true. But are we really going to catch that bottom? I don't know. I know that people who are buying at $120, because there were plenty of such people, didn't actually buy when Bitcoin was $80 or $70. And they're not buying now either because they say it's going to get even cheaper. I really have to wonder if they'll actually end up buying back in again once the price goes above $200, simply because everyone in the market will be so incredibly hyped up by then. It's a fascinating look into our collective psychology and our inner psyche. It is actually the case that when it comes down to making these critical financial decisions, we as human beings tend to make very few truly rational choices in the heat of the moment. And here, the second topic for the upcoming no comment, here are the traps that await those who try to build their own wealth, who try to save something. Let us know if you'd like us to talk about this for a moment. This isn't just for young people, not only for those who are just starting out, but especially for them, because they have the longest road ahead of them. It's worth listening to. It's worth reflecting on this topic. Please let us know if this specific topic interests you as well, and if you would like us to discuss it further here on Now Comment. Specifically, how the process of saving actually works, and what kind of hidden traps might await us when we try to build our own personal wealth.
We can take a brief moment to circle back to Donald Trump, who currently faces allegations of potentially utilizing a portion of the campaign funds that he earned from selling his tokens. To be more specific, I'm referring to both the official Trump-themed token and the World Liberty Financial Project, that is Liberty Financial. Let me add that he made this money last year, $1.4 billion.
These are the estimates based on his testimony. There's no exact data, but yes, that's how it can be estimated. That's correct.
Yes, and I'd also like to remind you that when he was selling Trump tokens, we could simply see that he sold 20% of the supply. The price was disclosed, and based on that, it was possible to predict it to some extent. In any case, We know his financial statement, but as it turns out, this statement is imprecise because it's not like it's his private wallet. Rather, it's the wallet of all the funds managed by his children. Donald Trump says, "My children and professional advisors manage this, so I personally do not make the decisions on what to invest in." That's probably true. Since he said so, such an honest man must be telling the truth. But in these official statements, they tend to provide broad ranges of estimates, rather than giving us any specific or exact dollar amounts. And as it actually turns out, in the year 2025, or was it perhaps even sooner than that? In the previous reporting period, he held stocks and bonds in the range of $225 to $608 million, and now he has moved into the next bracket from 703 million to 2.6 billion. So it's really hard to assess here. Yes, it's impressive, but generally there have been a lot of tweets. I even saw Reuters publish something like this, that Trump probably used the money he made from selling tokens not to hold it in crypto, although he has a lot in Bitcoin or in Ethereum, but still a significant portion of it could have gone towards buying stocks or bonds. And Trump commented on this, saying that he believes in Bitcoin and brought up this idea again. To reiterate once more, that the selling and trading of Bitcoin assets should not be taxed. But from what I have understood, it might not apply in every single specific circumstance. He said, "Write in the comments how you understand this topic I'm talking about now, that Bitcoin, which is used to buy something," because Trump says that Bitcoin is supposed to be this better money or a different kind of money, so that Bitcoin shouldn't be taxed. So
I sell Bitcoin in order to buy an apartment, for example, right?
yes, because I don't think that case was mentioned, but if I pay for coffee with Bitcoin, then it shouldn't be taxed, because at that moment, Bitcoin is acting as money. Crypto enthusiasts, people who are active in the market, there's actually a noticeable difference between someone who is involved in the crypto market and someone who isn't, because people who are still skeptical often ask, when will I be able to pay for coffee with Bitcoin? And I say, listen, you can already pay for coffee with Bitcoin in many places today, but if you have your own Bitcoin or even just a fraction of it, I guarantee you
shouldn't want to
pay me for coffee with it. That's what stablecoins are for. Even now, I was on a week-long vacation with a guy who's a born skeptic, but the kind you can actually talk to. You can have a conversation with him. And he once invested a bit in crypto, but he says, you know what? I'm waiting for the moment when I can pay with Bitcoin in stores like it's nothing. I said what I said. Even if that happens, it won't find practical use. That's all there is to it.
Let us know in the comments if you would like to pay with Bitcoin in stores. When we look at the statistics for such payments, it's actually stable coins that are the leading currency when it comes to crypto payments, while Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana are not used for these kinds of transactions, not very often. And that's precisely because we treat them more as investments rather than as a means of payment. But wait, here's something interesting. A news update from CZ, that is the founder of Binance, who still hasn't received the MyCA license. The founder of Binance said that right now it's true that AI agents, well, you can't go 50 minutes without mentioning AI. Yes, that's what he said. He says AI agents are simply carrying out hundreds, thousands of transactions. And here we can't escape the fact that the ideal tool for EIR agents to make payments is in fact crypto. And we should expect that here this aspect will significantly impact the bull market, which according to him is still ahead of us. Let me remind you, he's not the only one saying this. Raoul Pal says the same thing. His narrative is based on the idea that the main driver or the fuel of the upcoming bull run, which is supposed to push Bitcoin even above $350,000, will be the boom in AI. I mean,
in AI or
in agents, on the fact that AI agents will start working. His forecasts are extraordinarily intricate and multifaceted. You can examine and listen to every single detail of his analysis. However, it does seem that right now, AI is experiencing a significant period of uncertainty and a minor crisis, because it turns out there was a very sobering and necessary reality check, and this massive bubble has stopped growing as quickly as everyone would have liked. I don't want to say that it has burst, because we're still far from that, but new applications for AI are being sought, and there's an attempt to generate another wave of hype. And it seems to me that the financial possibilities of AI are being discussed more and more often. I want to say that AI is, in general, a difficult topic. I have to say, I never thought that we would already be witnessing such a revolution. This is really something that has surprised me a lot, but AI is changing reality. It's very possible that we're approaching the moment when these AI bots or AI agents will start handling some basic tasks for us. And now I have to say that would actually be helpful for me. I'm one of those people who really doesn't like paying for electricity, and it's not because I don't like paying, it's just that this is an activity that irritates me. Paying for electricity, for gas, for this, for
That, yeah, keeping track of all that, right?
it's a nightmare. If I had a bot like that, I would entrust it with those funds, those few hundred or maybe a few thousand zlotys. And I'd tell myself I would pay all my bills. And of course, at first, I'd probably be very, very skeptical, and I'd monitor what it was doing, but probably over time, it would turn out that it could handle it pretty well for me. And I'd trust it enough that it could take care of things like that. Of course, here we're talking about these bot transactions, not in the context of that kind of activity, but rather in the context of
Mega
micropayments, meaning if we want anything, we can pay for it. A fraction of a cent, a fraction of a gross. And these transactions have to be carried out somehow.
And actually, let me tell you, this indicator that tells us what we have, the supply of stable coins, up until now, we've interpreted it as the more stable coins in circulation, the greater the chance for a big spike in prices
Of crypto.
because that's actually how it was up until the point when stable coins were just a bridge between crypto and the fiat world and nothing else. But at the moment when stable coins, first of all, gained their own identity, meaning today someone simply buys USDT not to buy Bitcoin, but just to pay someone to the other side of the world faster, then that indicator doesn't matter as much anymore. And in fact, AI won't be paying with Bitcoin, as we already mentioned 5 minutes ago, because nobody wants to pay with Bitcoin. It won't be paying with Ethereum. It will be paying
With stable coins.
And what am I talking about? About the fact that we have to learn, again, how to interpret this indicator of stablecoin supply and be able to separate the fraction of stablecoins bought or accumulated to invest in crypto from those used for other purposes. The question is whether we are even able to separate or refine these two values.
Well, to be honest, it's really not going to be easy at all. Separate them, but in fact, stablecoins are starting to function, not to serve as a tool, to jump from the fiat world to the crypto world, but they are starting to have their own identity and their own utility. Here, I also want to point out that thanks to being adaptive, AI can start operating quickly. It will be able to very rapidly take advantage of new blockchains and new stablecoins. It won't be limited only to what the programmer has coded. Instead, it will be able to, in a way, learn to use other stablecoins as well. And that's quite good news because it could mean that there will be many stablecoins in circulation which will be used for different purposes. We will use one to pay, for example, an agent who will order movie tickets for us, and another to pay for help with reserving a table. These are the things that could make this competition, and I'm a fan of competition, very intense. Of course, there will be some confusion, but thanks to the competition, we will be able to witness better things or the creation of better things.
Łukasz, what's your slogan? So what is it?
My slogan remains unchanged. BCK, Bitcoin is still king. I believe that Bitcoin will still show its strength, although here, sorry for talking so long about this slogan, but it's starting to reach a point where those who talk about the super cycle, because there are people who say it's going to rise now, will end up on the same level as those who talk about the cycle. And then when it goes up, they'll confess, I won, I was right.
Well, yes, okay, that's possible. My slogan also remains unchanged. I won't be original. KNF, meaning Kanga. On the rise, Kanga's on the rise. Not only in Europe, not only in Poland, not only in Europe, but all over the world. So congratulations to you and to myself. Let's wrap up this episode because I think we're already talking nonsense. Take care, Łukasz. See you all in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
We are Kanga, beyond crypto.